Hi everybody, this is Gardy Raymond from consequencevideodesigns.com. Recently I've been working with Plexus and I've done a whole bunch of tutorials, well, not a whole bunch, but a handful of tutorials about Plexus, and I want to keep playing with it to see how far I can push things and what kind of different things we can do with it. So I was thinking the other day, what else can we do with lines? And I'm just looking at things in my everyday life, and the first thing that popped into my head was a guitar. So I made this little sample here, just playing around to see how it worked, and I think it turned out pretty well. So let's take a look at it real quick. Alright, so there you go. I created these lines out of the guitar, and you can see they distort in time with the music. I went online, I found this picture of a guitar in perspective. I don't own it, so I'm going to put this project file online for you to look at. And unfortunately, I'm not going to provide this image of the guitar because it's not mine to distribute. It's just one I found. And whoever's image this is, thank you very much for kindly letting me use it, even though you didn't really give me permission. Anyway, so you'll be able, if you want to work on this yourself, you'll have to find your own picture of a guitar, but everything else, all the Plexus lines and everything will be in the project file, so you can kind of jump into the composition here and see what I did. It took a little bit of time to figure out exactly how I wanted to do this, but it basically came down to I made some masks on a layer. You can see them here, the six masks here, one for each string. Applied those to the Plexus layer, which is actually called Lines Mask. Let's rename that Plexus layer. And move them in space with the camera, and then modified their points by adjusting the mask points here. I'm using lights for the distortion, and I used sound keys to get the amount of the distortion and for each of the notes. So I'm gonna skip a little bit here just to make it a little bit quicker, but hopefully you'll still understand it. And like I said, when I'll provide this project file so you can dig into it if you really want. Let's create a new composition here. It's 1920 by 1080. New tutorial composition. That duration is fine. Let's hit OK. Let's just create a new composition or a new layer with some new masks. So let's hit Command Y for a new solid, black solid. Let's call this Plexus. There we go. And let's create some vertical masks. One, and then we don't need to close the mask. All we need is the line. So let's duplicate this 5 times. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have 6, one for each guitar. String. Let's change the colors so we can differentiate between them. Blue. So now let's take these and spread them apart about the width of guitar strings. And it's not, oops, we don't need to do that. Click on these, hit return to get out of it, select your mask, double click it, move it over, click it, 6, and move it over. Alright, so there we have our 6 lines. Nothing's here. Plexus isn't applied. There's nothing here, so we're not going to see anything yet. I'm going to grab my guitar image, classical guitar 2. Let's drop it in here. Let's scale it up. Not right. And let's scale it out. Now you can see I did a terrible job of cloning it out, but when I downloaded this image, I brought it into Photoshop and cloned out the actual guitar strings that were here. You know, looking at it now, you can see how awful it looks, but in the final version, you can't really tell. So, you know, it worked out fine. So now we have Plexus. Let's go ahead and have this layer with the masks on it. Let's go ahead and apply Plexus, row by Plexus. And we're going to keep 1 point renderer for now. we're going to rename these masks because we're going to want a different points renderer for each mask because we want them to be affected differently, or individually rather, so we're going to want them to be named differently so we can make points renderers for each one. So we're just going to call this A, B, C, and I'm just hitting return to rename these D, E, and F. So there we go. Let's do Plexus points renderer. We're going to add some new geometry. We're going to add a path, change it from all masks to A. I know there's going to be, in the original I used about 1,000 points, but let's just start with 500 so we can see what it looks like once we do that. And we are going to get to color. We're going to select a color, and I selected this gold color, which I had originally sampled from the original guitar strings in this picture were about that gold color. You can see, let's hide those, they're that gold color there. So there's our gold color. This is group 1. We're going to knock opacity, we're going to bring opacity up to 100%. And let's Command-Shift-H, hide those. We need a layer new camera. That is fine. There we go. Oops, that's why we can't see anything. The guitar is on the top. There we go. There's our single mask layer right there. Or our single points renderer right there with that. So, we need lines for all of them, right? So let's duplicate the path object 5 more times. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And while I know this needed more, I'm just kind of going through the way that I did it so we can see it later. Let's change these to B, to C, D, E, missing one here? Yes, that's why. Well, that would be F. We'll bring it back down here. So I just have these in order, even though now they're not named in order. They're at least stacked in order: A, B, C, D, E, F. Thank you very much. So now that I have these lines here, we need to orient them in space because, as you can see, and I'll go back to this one too, I wanted to have them fall off and use the camera's depth of field and only have this area in focus and have this fall out of focus and this fall out of focus in the distance. So let's take our camera, and it gets a little confusing, so you got to think ahead of time how you want this to lay approximately. But let's turn it this way and then lay them down, and then turn it that way. And we can also do the we can add a transform affector here. Oops. And kind of adjust that. Adjust that, and then take the camera and move things about where we want them to be. So let's start right here. And then we'll adjust these accordingly, adjusting the masks. So that's about in the right place. It falls off into Z space now, which is the main goal here. Now to get all these lined up exactly how we need to get them lined up, we can go back to the Plexus layer. Let's Command-Shift-H again to bring up the masks. And even though the masks show up like this, you can adjust them. Oops. See, as we drag that out, it drags the end in. So let's undo that. And the first thing we should do, let's zoom out in our window here. Let's select all of these masks and drag them up. Drag them up, drag them up, drag them up. Drag them up until we see that they are about where we want them to be. Let's hit the tilde key. About where we want them to be in the background. And for now, that's going to be okay. Zoom in, hit the tilde key again. And then let's adjust the bottom ones, because the bottom ones I think are the most important. We want them to end. We can see where the original strings were wrapped around here. So let's go ahead and drag these bottom portions to where they need to be. Here. Here. And there. Now we can see up the top they're still incorrect, so we're going to need to adjust the top as well. Zoom out. You know what? Let's not do that. Tilde key again. And now we're using all of our screen real estate here, but, and it's kind of tough to see, but approximate them the best you can. Remember, these top parts of the strings are going to fall off into the distance. So they don't need to be perfect, but they do need to be fairly parallel to one another, like an actual guitar string. Here. And there. Okay. So now we zoom back in, we can see they're about in the right place. Let's just leave them like that for now. We can adjust them a little bit more later if we decide we need to. So let's hit the tilde key again. Let's hit Command-Shift-H to hide the masks. Now we can see I only have 500 points on each one of these lines. So we need to adjust those so it looks like a solid line. So let's go back to our path object. Like I said, it's up at 1,000 was where I found a good place to be. You can see that's pretty solid there. And right now, you can still see the individual dots a little bit, but once we add the depth of field in the camera, you're not going to see them as much. And again, if you want to add more points in later, we can add more points in later. So let's go back through here real quick, change all these to 1,000. And 1,000. All right, so there's even more there. Still keep it at 1,000. Make these points renderers. We can increase the point size a little bit if we want. And also if you adjust that, you're going to see the difference. Anyway, there we go. Okay, now they're in place. We need to affect them. So we're going to use sound keys to affect them. So let's make a new solid. Call this sound keys. We'll do effect, trap code, sound keys. There we go. Now we need a music file to stick in here. I have this acoustic noodling file, which I think came with Soundtrack Pro. I just did a search for acoustic guitar on my computer and this came up. I'm pretty sure it came with Soundtrack Pro, so you might have it on your computer if you have the old Final Cut Studio, or if not, grab anything that you think would work for the piece of music that you're using. So we can turn that off for sound keys. We can select the audio layer, not Plexus. It needs to be acoustic noodling. So now as we go through, we can see everything in here. Let's solo our sound keys layer. Let's keep our audio layer on. And if you hold down the Command key and scrub through, you can go a little bit slower. Because if you just play through this, sometimes it's hard to pinpoint exactly where which notes are going to be the ones you want to use. So that first note is this big one right here. So let's make all three of our ranges active, because we're going to want 6, so we're going to have to duplicate the sound keys layer again too. So we'll activate that. For range 1, we're going to hit Command-Shift-H again because we had everything hidden, and drag this to just be this one sound here. So that's 1. So right next to it is another one that I'm going to want to use, this one right here. So my second range, I can set right on this note. And I'm making them so the high point is pretty much going to fill the whole range there. So we're going to use an expression later to convert these, and so we can use them how we want to use them. But I prefer to have a 0 to 100 scale rather than adding another expression on there to convert a, say, 0 to 40 scale to 0 to 100 and then back around. It's not too difficult to do, but might as well make our work a little bit less difficult. So let's keep scrubbing through. This is our third note right here. Let's drag it over here. And as we see, the other 3 we're going to want to use are 1, 2, 3 here most likely. It's going to be this one, Yep. So we're going to see it's these 3 right here that we're going to want to use. So let's duplicate our sound keys layer. So we have sound keys 2, and then range 1 on our sound keys 2 layer is going to go over here. Range 2 is going to go here, and range 3 is going to go here. So let's scrub through and see where the high points are. So that's a high point here. Let's drag it up there. There's a high point for this one. And that's probably the high point for this one. Okay, so now that we have all of our different ranges selected here, let's go ahead and for sound keys 1, let's hit apply, and then sound keys 2, let's hit apply. So now when we select the sound keys layer and hit U to reveal all the keyframes, we see all the keyframes that showed up. Save this project file again. So now we have numerical values for each of these individual audio keys. So we can turn off the sound keys layer now. And we're going to use these numerical values to drive the displacement of each individual string. In order to do that, we're going to use lights, and we're going to use an individual light for each string, which is why when we go back here, we have a different path object, or a different path object for each path here. And what I also wanted to do that I didn't do earlier is these should be in different groups. So path object 1 is in group 1, but path object B should be in group 2, C in group 3, D in group 4, E in group 5, and F in group 6. So these are all on individual groups. The points are still here because the points rendered is for all groups. But we're going to want a different noise effector for each group as well. And we're also going to want a light to drive that animation because it is in XYZ space. So let's make a new light, not a new camera, a new light. It's a point light, it's white, intensity 100. Okay. We're going to go to our position. We're going to change the Z position to 0, just so we have kind of an idea of where it is. Kind of drag it to about where we think it should be here. And we're going to call this light A. And we're going to go to the light options and link the intensity to output 1. But we're going to use a little bit of an expression in here as well. So the intensity, we're going to option click on it to bring up the expression. We're going to drag it to output 1. We're going to hit OK. So as we go through, we can see this intensity varies as we scrub through. However, we don't want it, sometimes there's a little bit of sound in here, but we don't want it to affect this all the time. We only want it to affect when the string is actually plucked, when there's actually a deliberate noise coming from that. So when it's at 9% here, that doesn't really seem like that's when a string was plucked. However, when it jumps up to, where are we? There, when it's up at 95%, that would be when it was plucked. Okay. So we need to tell After Effects to ignore anything that's a lower number and use anything that's a higher number. So I grabbed this expression straight from another tutorial that's on aescripts.com. You pull it up real quick. And I grabbed it from this Black City Virus Advanced Plexus Audio React tutorial. It's a cool little tutorial. Definitely check that out if you get a chance. But I learned this little expression from him, and it applies perfectly for this one as well. So let's go back to our original comp, and I'll twirl down my light options, twirl down my intensity, and grab this little expression here. So let's copy it, and I paste it in here. Going to be exactly the same because I have the names the same, so we're going to get rid of that. And real quick, what this says is we created two variables, x and y. X equals this light's intensity value. So to do that, I just typed in x equals, and then you can drag the pick whip to the intensity value, and it sticks that little expression right in there. And then the y value equals the number that is in the sound key layer in output 1. So to get that, you'd hit y, you'd type y equals, drag the pick whip down to output 1, and there you go. We're going to hit a semicolon. Now it's a basic if-else expression. If the y value is greater than 50, then I want the x value, the light intensity, to be the value of this output times 2. So if the number here is 95, the number that shows up down here is 95, then the actual intensity value of the light will be 95 times 2. Now the else portion is if the y value is not greater than 50, if it's greater than 50, x equals y times 2, else the x value, being the intensity of the light, equals 0. So if this number is below 50, the intensity value is going to equal 0. If this number down here is greater than 50, it will equal this value times 2. So we're going to hit return. So now you can see that this output value here is 95, but the intensity is 190. So that's just going to serve to pop the distortion a little bit more in this, because sometimes a noise value of 90 in Plexus isn't enough. And if you're going through and you find out it's too much, you could do y times 1.5. You could make x equals y. Or you could multiply it by any other number. It could be y times 10. So this comes up to 1,900. But I found for this worked the best. So now let's go back to our Plexus layer and add a noise effector. So we're going to use lights for noise. We're going to use a light. Did I do a capital or a lowercase? Capital. The capitals and lowercases do matter in the light name. And we will get the effector radius from the intensity of the light, which is the distance that it affects. So that would mean it would either affect a small portion here or would start to affect farther out here. Just imagine that effector radius is a sphere that extends out from this light right here. And we're going to get the amplitude also from the intensity value. So you can see right there already it started to affect these. So the number that shows up here will be both the noise amplitude and the effector radius. We want them to be, I wanted them to be the same, so they're going to be the same. And we also want this to affect only group 1, because this note right here, this output 1, is only this string right here. Now let me say real quick, I think I have my strings backwards here. I'm not a musician, so I think I might have my strings reversed in terms of tonality, but this is just the way it's going to be. So now let's move this light around there till we see it start to affect. Whoops. Let's lock this Plexus layer for a second. So here's a better idea. Let's change this light option real quick times 5. So we have a bigger range of where it is. So there we go. Now that we can set that into about the center of where we want it to affect. So now if we knock this back down to 2, we can see that it's affecting right about where we want it to affect, right? So right about there. Okay, cool. So now as we go through, just when this number is higher, it's going to get affected. So only a little bit here, a little bit here. Now we just need to simply set up these lights for every other string. So let's duplicate it 5 times. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have 6 keys. Let's rename these B, C, D, E, and F. Let's go back to the Plexus that is locked. Let's go back to the Plexus and let's duplicate the noise effector also 5 more times. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And let's change the numbers. B, C, D, E, and F. So we have the same distortion values for all of them. And the other thing we have to do is go into our light options. Let's hit the tilde key to bring this up. All the way down. Light options, intensity, what we can do here. Actually, all these, close them up, select all these, hit UU. There we go. Now it brings all these up. Now the way we're doing this is A, B, C, D, E, F. So what we need to do is change a little bit in here. So for B, it would simply be change output 1 to output 2, hit return. You could also select this and then pick whip it. I'll do that here. I could check this Y value is actually going to equal output 3. I feel it's just as easy to simply change the numbers. Now, this one is going to be output 1, but on effect sound keys 2. So we'll change this to sound keys 2. I believe it's sound keys space 2. This is going to be sound keys space 2 output 2. This is going to be sound keys 2 output 3. So there. Now these will all change at different times. 153, 170 down here. All right. So let's select everything, close them all up. Now we just need to move them into place. So let's select the B light, move it over here. And the best way to do this is we're actually going to want to find a point. We could actually open this up. Let's find a point that is greater than 50 for output 2 there. There we go. So for B light, we need to move this up. There's one thing that we still didn't do. There's always something else to do. It's noise effectors. Here we go. We have to change the group of the noise effectors. Remember we set all these path objects up to different groups? Well, we need to change the noise effector groups as well. So B is group 2, C group 3, D group 4, E group 5, and F group 6. There we go. Select everything in here, close them all up. Now, there we go. Now we can see that the B light is in the right place. Now, let's go to output 3, which is the C light. I saw it was at 100 back here a little ways. There we go. Let's grab the C light. Move the C light right here where it should be. Now, output 1, which would be the D light on sound keys 2. That's a good spot. D light should be right here. E light, output 2 here. 88's pretty good. Very good choice for it. There we go. And then F light. 91's a good one. F light. Should come over here. Go up. It's Y value. It's right here. There we go. So now we're basically all set up. Let's hit Command-Shift-H to hide all these lights and do a quick preview. Now, you can see it just moves these out of place, but they seem kind of static. Whereas in the original one, they move around a bit more. There's also a lines renderer. So for the noise affector, we want to animate the noise a little bit. The noise evolution. See if we, oops, it's not the right one. We're on noise affector 1. So if we go to noise details and we animate the noise evolution, see how it moves those around? That's what we want. So undo that. And I just used a simple time expression on this one, and I think it was a real low number, and I'm going to cheat here and just go back and look and see what I set it at. Time times 5 was the evolution amount that I used here. So we go back here, with noise effector, evolution. I option clicked on that stopwatch there, time times 5. We'll just copy that, and we'll hit return. And we'll do it on all the rest of the noise effectors here. Noise details, noise evolution, option click, paste in time times 5. Paste time times 5. So there we go. Close them all up. Now if we do a quick preview of this again, see how much they start to animate already. That looks a little better, right? It actually even seems like it's a little bit much, and it looks like the see they're shooting out farther. You know, maybe we want to go back and adjust the amount down here. Maybe we want this to be times 1.5 instead of times 2. And that will just make these effects slightly less than, let's A, B, C, D, E, F. Let's check out B light just to look at that. Let's do times 1.5. And it's affected a little bit more, and it's moves a little bit more, or a little bit less. The other thing that's going to affect the way that these look is the actual placement of the lights. So if we zoom in here a little bit and then grab, say, the C light here and scoot it over. See how they're really blowing out to the right here? So if you move this back a little bit, you know, move these lights back a little bit, or just kind of move them around, it's going to, it's not going to encompass the strings quite as much, or, you know, move them quite as much. If you, depending on where you put them, it's going to affect them more or less. So, you know, this is just a little bit of trial and error to see what works best for you. But for right now, I think we're pretty good for all these, and you know, that's all just kind of personal preference stuff. Now, one other thing I did was I added a lines renderer. Lines. And the color from vertices, I wanted them thinner. Change that to 0.5. And I also didn't want there to be lines when they weren't moving, and I didn't really want the strings to touch one another until they were distorted. And to kind of get around that, I just made them at 0 thickness until they had a little bit of distance, and then pop that up. And the same thing with the opacity, kind of kept that down and then bump that up. Then this is also going to be trial and error kind of thing. And it's going to, you know, depend on your personal preference. So, you know, they're a little bit less really reaching out to grab the other strings while they're not moving. But as you play through that, let's Command-Shift-H to hide everything again. Let's do another quick RAM preview. Let's stop that. Okay, so there you go. So that gives you a little bit more. This little flicker here is just kind of inherent in Plexus. It just kind of happens. Once you do a final render, that won't be there. It'll be fine. So you get, if you like the amount that this is distorted, then you're good to go. If you don't like it, then you just really need to go back and tweak all these other settings. Either change this noise evolution so they're not flying around as much. You can change this to say 3 or 2, and they'll move around a little bit less. You can make it more. You can change the thickness of your lines. There's all kinds of things in something like this that can get tweaked to really change the way that the animation looks. So it's just kind of a again, it's trial and error, and you kind of have to just figure out what you like and the way you like it to look. So we can take the camera, we can go to our camera options, we can turn on depth of field, we have to go to Plexus, we have to go to the bottom and turn on depth of field. Now you can see depth of field is, really crazy. Let's go back, we don't need that. Go back to our camera. Let's turn our blur level down to say 50. Aperture down to, let's drop that down to 8. 1700 seems about good. Let's change our aperture. Let's bring that up to 20. So that's pretty good right there. That keeps this front end blurry, keeps this back end really blurry. You end up with these black outlines here, and I'm not quite sure what causes that. Maybe somebody can leave a comment and let me know what they think causes that. But I was able to get around that in the final comp, and I'll show you what I did for that. Let's turn off our depth of field real quick, because that makes it render a lot slower. So the final thing I did is I turned on depth of field, and then because that takes a long time to render, and what I wanted to do is slowly push in on the guitar towards the center here and kind of crop it off. I didn't want to do that motion originally, so I turned off the guitar layer and just went ahead and rendered out this comp with an animation codec with an alpha channel, and just brought it back in as these lines. And that's what I did in this comp 5 here too. So I have this guitar Plexus layer here. If I solo it, that's what it is. And I rendered it out with the depth of field, so that was in there. So I have that layer, and then this layer is, I duplicated it and dragged it down just a little bit. I tinted it to black and a dark gray, so it kind of gives a little bit of shadow here on this. You could have just made some lines and put it in here, but I wanted to make sure I had some shadows from this actual distortion here, if any of it happened to fall on the actual guitar itself. So you would have got a little bit of those shadows there. It turned out it didn't, but that's just kind of the way it is. You see I have a mask over it. So I didn't need the shadows at the end. I think it was, once I had the shadows back here, I think it just started to cause too much trouble in the neck of the guitar. So, we didn't need that. So I just masked out that and used this guitar, this portion right here. To get rid of that blackness, I believe what I did, yeah, see, in this original comp, I have this blackness here. Five is a push in, comp 4 is that. Ah, yes, there we go. Yes, that's what it was. So this was comp 4. It was this whole composition that I took and stuck into comp 5, and then I rendered that out. And this comp 4 render is what came into here. And you can see this comp 4 has a mask over it. So if I brought this all the way up, you should be able to see the blackness that kind of comes into the end here. It's just a mask with a real soft feather on it, and that kind of got rid of this black that occurs from the depth of field. So there you go. I know this was a long one, but thanks for sticking it out with me. And hopefully you learned something again. This is Gardy Raymond from ConsequenceVideoDesigns.com, and have a wonderful day. Bye.